You're going to say, I thought this was a conversation about soft skills. Why are we talking about the S&P 500? Part of the reason why we're talking about the S&P 500 is because this is a foundation for everything that we're going to talk about. What this shows is the value of the S&P 500 when we think about hard assets versus intangible assets, right? So in the mid to late 70s, that was roughly 85% hard assets. This is plant, equipment, inventory, things you can touch and feel, right? And today that number is less than 10%. So in about 40 years, our economy has completely shifted, right? So how we create value for the organizations that we're all a part of is not through a production process where we take raw materials and translate that into something that a consumer will buy. And instead, it really is all a function of our ability to take our knowledge, our skills, our experiences, work with someone else that has a different set of skills, capabilities, experiences to create value for the organizations. What this says is this is a massive shift to the knowledge economy, and we're seeing that play out in the value of the stock market, right? And I could have taken any market and thrown it up there, and we would have seen roughly the same thing happen. We could have put, an Asian market up there, and you would have seen that same transition happen. And what that means is it should put a premium on soft skills, right? Like we should care more about these ways of working together and taking those experiences and coming out the other side with something meaningful. And there's a really key difference between hard skills and soft skills. Not to minimize what you guys are going to talk about here the rest of the day, but if I make you more effective at Excel, or I make you more effective at selling, you're going to be incrementally more valuable to the organization. The interesting thing about collaboration, right, all of these, how we take these soft skills and we use them in conjunction with each other, is that it's not just incrementally more valuable, it's actually multiplicative, right? So it can become exponentially value creating for our organization. So a pretty big difference. Now, if we look at the data in terms of where we're investing and what organizations say that they needs is about 15% hard skills, 85% soft skills. And one of the things we talked about was there's not credentialing on the soft skill side, very little credentialing, right? So organizations are saying that they need soft skill development, and that is a differentiator for their organizations. Yet if we look at where those actual dollars are spent, only about 25 to 30% of that investment is happening in those soft skills. So just something to keep in mind. And then another really key element, right? You can't turn on the news today without hearing about AI, and right, like how AI is going to displace jobs and it's going to make everybody more efficient. It's all very exciting stuff. Really cool frontier. The interesting thing about that is where are we talking about replacing jobs and impacting skills, right? It's making you more effective or more fast or more efficient in terms of building an Excel spreadsheet or coding, right? Like these are things that we probably 10 years ago wouldn't have even thought, oh my gosh, what? We could eliminate a fourth or even a half of our software engineering jobs. That's insane. So these emotional and relational skills, right, collaboration and the basic building blocks of what it takes to collaborate effectively are the very skills that can't be replaced by AI. So again, this would seem to indicate or lend credence to the fact that we should be spending more time talking about developing human skills, not necessarily developing hard skills. Again, sorry guys, maybe I should have gone last. The other thing is if we look at the data, organizations that put a greater emphasis on building collaborative skills, right, whatever that looks like for you, puts a focus on collaboration, has outsized returns, right? So if they emphasize collaboration and they provide skilling and create capabilities internally, they outperform those that are not emphasizing that. So again, really interesting things happening here. what I would call this is a disconnect, right? A disconnect between what we know and what we're actually doing, right? So we know that companies need soft skills to be competitive. Those are the very skills that can't be replaced by AI. And in order to be competitive and create value in this new knowledge-based economy, right, it's the most critical skill set. Yet, we still tend to focus more on how can we make better salespeople? How can we help people program faster or be more efficient in delivering that code? So what's driving that? Handful of factors. One, our inability to calculate a return on this, right? Really difficult if you go to the CFO tomorrow and you're like, hey, I want to create a new leadership development program, or I want to teach people how to be more effective at communication. Great, how much are you going to spend and how's that going to translate into sales? So it's hard, right? So that's a major problem. I would also argue that's a challenge on the hard skill development as well, but nevertheless, it exists. Second thing is we have really ineffective training tools and approaches on the soft skill side, and I would say that's even more so. This is what we call the forgetting curve, right? For most of you involved in learning and development, this is like a really common thing where it's like, hey, you bring people into a room like this, you guys are going to walk away and tomorrow you're going to only remember a very small fraction, despite how good we might be, of the things that we're going to talk about. And honestly, the majority of it's probably going to be graphics or images or stories that we tell, right? And then if you get 7 days out, right, you're only going to remember a very small fraction of that, right? Let alone be able to actually put that into practice. And that's even more acute with soft skills. Third thing is we have these like broader cultural influences or that make it more difficult to build soft skills. So I'm just going to list out a couple. One, mobile devices that make us less effective at social emotional skills. Who in here has teenagers that you're raising right now? Okay, I mean, woo! I mean, trying to get them to like pick up a phone call or, you know, it's funny because we're like in the restaurant and they'll see a friend and they'll literally sit there at the table and text each other. They'll have an entire conversation through text and yet will refuse. Like we'll literally walk past their table on the way out the door and they won't even look at each other and acknowledge each other. And I'll be like, seriously? Like, did you not say hi to, you know, fill in the blank? And they're like, oh no, that was awkward. That would be awkward, is what I hear. But they will also tell me that they've exchanged 50 text messages while they've been sitting there. Or they'll literally take a picture of each other across the restaurant and then text each other the picture of themselves or of each other. And that's the interactions they have, right? That makes it even more challenging to teach social and emotional skills because we have a generation entering the workforce that have been trained differently in terms of how they interact and how they collaborate. Remote and hybrid work, right? You know, if we're all remote or we're all in person, it makes it a little bit easier, but we lose a lot of context. Like we're all excited to be here in person again, right? But we're also like, oh my gosh, I forgot what this is like. How do I make small talk? Like, oh, I had to actually like do my hair or whatever, right? I wish I could do my hair, but unfortunately, it's not the case. And then ultimately, what all this is doing, right? It was only exacerbated by COVID. Is making us be more lonely, right? We're more isolated, and what that means is it forces us to think about us versus them, right? We don't see ourselves as a collective we or even desire to potentially engage with each other in a more meaningful way. So, and that trend happened long before COVID, right? It's being driven by larger societal trends, right? Technology, all the other things that you might think about. There's a phrase for this. It's called socio-technical theory, which basically is that our technology and our process and our environment is exceeding, like the pace of growth in those things, are exceeding our emotional or social ability to adapt and evolve, right? And there's always a gap. Every single major technological innovation, this occurs. So, not a new phenomenon. All right. So I just really painted a dire picture, didn't I? What are some strategies that potentially work? So a handful of things that we can think about. How do we make it embedded, So especially for social, emotional, um, human skill building, right? I won't use soft skills, but I have a lot today. So how do we make it connected and contextually relevant, right? How do we stay with people instead of like taking them out and trying to train them in a room? You know, you have to really be engaged, and it has to be connected with the people that you're building those skills with, right? Like you can't just sit at a desktop and hope to try to like take a quiz on this and learn how to do it. Second is you have to nudge behavior, right? And these are all like learning concepts. Like it works in hard skills or soft skills, but like how do we do this differently for social skills? Takes some thought. It needs to be for self and others, right? Because you can't really do that effectively with others if you don't really understand yourself first. So you can't just look at yourself in isolation. You have to think about the interaction or the interplay between your set of behaviors and someone else's set of behaviors and figure out how do we navigate those two things. Experiential, right? Again, this is not that different than hard skills. If we were helping somebody sell better or write an Excel spreadsheet or build an Excel spreadsheet better, experience is key. And then the last thing is data, and this is like one of the more difficult problems, but I think is being solved by how much data we're accumulating in the workplace and on a lot of new things, right? Because if all of our work and our engagement is happening in an interactive way or with digital tools and solutions, then it makes it much easier to leverage that data to help build skills and to prove an ROI or a business case on it. So those are just a handful of things that we're seeing, right, that work well. So we know this, and I'm really trying not to make this an advertisement. We do know this because we've used all 5 of those strategies in building our own technology platform. And it's working. And if you have questions or whatever, I do have we have a little thing here where, and I'll come back to it in a second, but you can scan the QR code and try it yourself. Here's some of the results that we're seeing, right? And this is across organizations, large and small, across industry. And again, because we're leveraging data, we're ingesting data from other third-party apps, we're using the data that we are collecting internally as well, is that we're seeing 15% improvement in people's ability to use their strengths every day at work, right? We're seeing team performance increase, the ability to recognize and celebrate individuals and team members on a daily basis. These are just a smattering, but oftentimes that's one of the more difficult pieces, is really being able to prove that like the training that you're doing has an impact.
Let us know in the comments which part of this video helped you the most, and be sure to grab your free guide that's linked in the description. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.